Reboots and spin-offs are a tricky thing at the best of times. For every Frasier or Better Call Saul, there's a Joey or a Heroes Reborn. And wrestling is no different. I mean, how many times is Vince McMahon going to dress up random characters as the Road Warriors and expect them to get little more than a big fat meh out of the crowd? Many wrestling teams and stables are born from previous alliances coming together again, or bigger groups splintering into smaller factions. Whilst the vast majority of these kinds of groups struggle, there is a handful that we can look at as the blueprint on how to make it work. The following are the best examples of that. I'm Sai for WhatCulture.com, and these are the 10 best spin-off factions in wrestling history. Number 10. The Radicals. Long-time real-life friends Dean Malenko, Perry Saturn, Shane Douglas and Chris Benoit were tired of not getting their time in the spotlight in WCW. This was both a story shown on screen as they formed the Revolution in 1999, but also the truth behind the scenes. That frustration was certainly at a tipping point, because whilst the Revolution was televised, it wasn't for very long. In January 2000, a year after establishing the Revolution, Benoit, Saturn and Malenko were seen in the crowd at WWF Raw is War alongside fellow WCW star Eddie Guerrero. It was a shocking image for wrestling fans at the time, and one that is included in every nostalgic look back at the Monday Night Wars. After involving themselves in a match, the Radicals soon found themselves parts of Vinnie Mac's fed as legitimate competitors. It was a great get for the WWF, a group of unbelievably talented workers, several of which would go on to hold gold in the company, and an excellent way to introduce new talent jumping from the sinking ship of their competitors. Whilst the Radicals may not have been greater than the sum of its parts, it holds the distinction of bringing those parts to the WWF in a big way. Number 9. The B-Team. Right, stay with me here. Many comedy groups have their short day in the sun, and the B-Team was no different. What made them stand out was the journey to that point. The B-Team are, in a way, a spin-off of a spin-off, starting life originally as the Social Outcasts, essentially the 2016 equivalent of the Job Squad. Curtis Axel, Bo Dallas, Heath Slater and Adam Rose had a few funny moments, but never quite got over enough for a proper run. The group transformed when The Miz popped up the next summer and swept up 2 of its members to be his so-called Miztourage. The already established Stooges-esque slapstick chops of Dallas and Axel made sure they excelled in this role, doing decently well with what was essentially the spot of comedy chaperones for the A-lister. As crowds enjoyed their work more and more, the Miztourage turned on their leader and transformed yet again into the B-Team. It's strange to think now, but for a short but wonderful few weeks, fans were writing capital B's on their own plain white shirts to support the duo. The two celebrated their first win as a unit like they'd won the Super Bowl, and whilst the iron was hot, they picked up the Raw Tag Team Championships to a massive pop, marking Bo Dallas's only main roster title win of his career, because we don't count the 24/7 title because it's the 24/7 title. Do I really need to explain that? Number 8. The Jericho Appreciation Society. The Inner Circle were an important part of the first couple of years of All Elite Wrestling, setting up Le Champion Chris Jericho as the top dog alongside a good variation of talent. The young upstart Sammy Guevara, former Impact Tag Champions Proud and Powerful, and the silent muscle of Jake Hager. Come the winter of 2021 though, the group had lost its focus and fans had begun to turn on Chris's infantile promo material. Haha, you've got a square head. Ugh. And so, as the Inner Circle fell apart on the 9th of March 2022 episode of AEW Dynamite, the Jericho Appreciation Society rose from the flames, the remaining pair of the Circle transferring their allegiance into something fresh. With Jericho at the front, Hager at the back, and another set of fresh names under the group in the form of 2.0 and Daniel Garcia, the general layout of JAS essentially acts as a reboot for the Inner Circle, this time calling upon Jericho's storied career in WWE, playing off of the sports entertainer persona and Y2J's massive ego. No doubt the most recent entry on this list, JAS has a lot to prove, but so far it's surprising what a few fresh faces and a rebrand can do. Every time you think Jericho's star is starting to fall, he finds a way to prove you wrong. Number 7. BWO. Parody is an important part of wrestling and has been for a long time. Typically though, it's short-lived, or better yet, a one-night-only affair, as overexposure shows the relative shallowness that comes with just poking fun at pre-existing characters and groups. ECW's Blue World Order may just be the sole exception to that rule. For months, Steven Richards and the Blue Meanie had been doing parodies and imitations for the entertainment of ECW's audiences, including musical acts and wrestlers from the WWF and WCW. At November to Remember 1996, the two, at the advice of Bubba Ray Dudley, formed the Blue World Order, a parody of the NWO stable that was steering the ship of World Championship Wrestling. Mocking the characters and their member turnover rates, the BWO only seemed to get more and more popular as time went on. It evolved beyond parody, adding its own stories such as BWO Japan until, at Barely Legal, Richards was even elevated to the main event scene as he unsuccessfully fought for the #1 contendership for the ECW title. The BWO was even revered enough to make a return in the WWE in the 2000s as a nostalgic throwback to ECW's past. Joey Styles said it best when he called, "If any gimmick never deserved to make a dime and made a boatload of cash, this is it." Number 6. Evolution. Triple H is no stranger to factions, and we'll get to him later in this list, no doubt, but his time in the 2000s produced a stable that did a hell of a lot better than it sounds written on paper. I mean, essentially, the Evolution was to be another attempt at a modern version of the Four Horsemen. Furthermore, it wouldn't be the first time that Ric Flair was at the centre of a spin-off of his classic faction, but the less said about the Yamazaki Corporation, the better. Whilst Evolution continued a lot of the Horseman tropes, 4 incredibly compelling wrestlers, suited, booted and minted, holding dominance over the company's gold, it at least made an effort to add its own wrinkle that gave it its namesake, with Flair representing the past, Trips as the present, and the up-and-comers Randy Orton and Batista being groomed to be the company's future. As a group, Evolution is probably best remembered as part of Triple H's never-ending reign of terror with the World Heavyweight title, but we shouldn't overlook the fact that Ric Flair and Batista held tag team gold together, because that's still a confusing sentence to me all of these years later. More than anything, the interpersonal stories within Evolution gave us 2 of the company's biggest future stars, Randy Orton and Batista, as the stable exploded. Number 5. Los Ingobernables de Japón. When Tetsuya Naito's promised IWGP World Heavyweight Championship match was removed from the Wrestle Kingdom main event slot, it was a chance for the character to make a change. Once the next babyface in waiting, Naito returned to New Japan after a tour with the Mexican promotion CMLL with a new attitude that he'd obtained from association with Los Ingobernables that was brash and uncaring. The original group, formed by Rush, La Mascara and La Sombra, is one of CMLL and the Mexican wrestling scene's most prominent and revered heel stables of the modern era, if not ever. With Naito aligning himself with Evil and Bushi to create the Japanese wing of the faction, it would be the final piece of his puzzle and make waves throughout the company. Throughout the last 7 years, LIJ has established themselves as one of the most popular and most consistent factions in the company, with minimal member changes and an insane rap sheet of title wins to boot. And that is, as they say, tranquilo. Number 4. The Undisputed Era. It's the history of the Undisputed Era that made it such an awesome entity when it arrived out of nowhere in NXT in 2017. Originally, Adam Cole and Kyle O'Reilly debuted in Ring of Honor as the tag team Future Shock. O'Reilly then moved on to form Red Dragon with Bobby Fish, and the pair feuded with Cole's new stable Kingdom. With a complex backstory like that, it was anyone's guess what the three would be doing in WWE when they all signed their deals. Throughout the night of TakeOver Brooklyn 3, the trio made their presence known, putting their history as Red Dragon and Future Shock behind them and forming one of the most unstoppable units in WWE history, a spin-off of 2 teams combining into the Undisputed Era. The UE, later joined by fellow ROH alumni Roderick Strong, would go on to be the centerpiece of NXT for years to come, entertaining fans with their frat house behavior and 5-star matches, picking up titles and accolades like it was nothing, and at one time completing their prophecy of holding all the gold in the brand at once. Future Shock and Red Dragon were fun, but they were nothing like the powerhouse of the Undisputed Era. Number 3. NWO WOLFPAC. The formation of the NWO in WCW was a revelation, revitalizing careers and lighting the fire of the Monday Night Wars. It wasn't all perfect, however, as the New World Order quickly became the clown car equivalent of a stable with its constant and confusing stream of new members. This facilitated change and, as luck would have it, this change created a chance for something fresh. As core members of the group grew apart, Kevin Nash recruited Randy Savage and Conan to a breakaway faction in order to go to war with Hulk Hogan. The NWO Wolfpac swapped the black and white for black and red, never more prominently seen as when the group indoctrinated the icon Sting with his iconic swap to crimson red face paint. The NWO Civil War storyline reignited interest in a stable that had become bloated and tired by the late 90s, and Wolfpac got over fast. Their hip-hop entrance music and street swagger has definitely dated now. Lex Luger has never looked more like your uncomfortable uncle trying to look cool, but at the time it was what WCW audiences craved. NWO Wolfpac was a through and through babyface version of the NWO. After years of the popular but nonetheless evil group at the top of the card, it was refreshing to have this new spin on the formula. Number 2, The Elite. When Kenny Omega turned on AJ Styles at New Year's Dash 2016, he and the Young Bucks made a secret agreement that would change the face of wrestling. Thus, the Elite were born. Omega's time as Bullet Club patriarch was without a doubt the group's most successful era, drawing new international fans to the New Japan product and catapulting the worth of many Gaijin stars into the stratosphere. Kenny, Nick and Matt shared the brightest part of that spotlight. They documented their journey and built stories through the use of the Being the Elite vlog series, and the Elite was the driving force of many feuds surrounding Bullet Club infighting with the likes of Cody Rhodes and Adam Cole. More than that, however, when they moved on from NJPW, the Elite carried that audience they had made into a brand new era for professional wrestling when they formed All Elite Wrestling. Number 1, D-Generation X, the DX Army. The unit of D-Generation X is always going to be a name that people remember as one that pushed the boundaries. However, whilst it was the original incarnation of Triple H and Shawn Michaels that made the initial splash, what came after should be by no means discredited. Following WrestleMania 14, Michaels was out with a back injury and Triple H and Chyna were in need of some new bodies to surround themselves with. Replacing the Heartbreak Kid was no small feat, and thus into the fray came the DX Army. Billy Gunn, Road Dogg and X-Pac. It was a bold risk but a necessary move, and it's fair to say it paid off. What followed were some of the WWF's most famous and memorable skits. Starting life as heels, it was this incarnation of the group that really had to go with the tide and go full-blown babyface when their hijinks and the suck it mantra got too popular to control. The opening shtick of the New Age Outlaws, their feud against McMahon's Corporation, and the much replayed attack on WCW headquarters, the DX Army are responsible for some of the most referenced moments in WWE history. Most spin-offs aren't quite as good as the original, but there is certainly a debate to be had about which version of DX overshadows the other. Let us know which version of DX is your favourite down in the comments below, and other spin-off factions in wrestling that you love. I've been Cy for What Culture, and have a good week.